My name is Franklin, and I'm an atheist. I've read a lot about religion, but reading tells you little about how it's actually practiced. 76% of people in the United States claim some sort of religion. Christians, Buddhists, Jedi. What is it about their religion that resonates with who they are? How does their religion make them a better person? And what do they think is still missing about how we understand the world? My goal is to grow my knowledge and wither my ignorance. I think it's important to talk to them and find out what they believe. Today I talk with one of the oldest religions in the world. Well, a newer version of an old religion. I'll be speaking with Ariel Edery, the rabbi at Temple Beth Shalom in Raleigh, North Carolina. Strictly speaking, Beth Shalom is the name of the congregation, not the building. Jewish religious law allows that communal Jewish worship can be carried out anywhere with at least 10 Jewish people present. Rabbi Edery invited me to interview him in the main sanctuary, where services take place. Rabbi means teacher, so let's learn something about Reform Judaism. Hey everyone, welcome to the What They Believe series. We're here at Temple Beth Shalom talking with Rabbi Edery. I keep doing it wrong. And so we're going to be talking about Judaism. There are several versions of Judaism. Which one do you identify?
To say Judaism, sometimes people are not really aware, even Jews are not aware, that is like to say Christianity, or it is like to say liberalism. There's lots and lots of variety. Jews have historically not always been separated officially in denominations, but in the modern world, we are also done that because it's easier to associate with other congregations who are like-minded. So I belong to Reform Judaism. I grew up in the conservative Judaism movement. And so they're not like a real boundary lines. If you're a Jew and you belong everywhere. But definitely we have different stances and somehow modified practices.
So what would be the reform part? What got reformed?
So Reform Judaism is, in short, is a way in which Judaism adapted to living in the modern world. So, and what I mean by that, traditional Jewish practices have diet restrictions. But I'm at the workplace and I don't have my own kitchen. So what do I do? Traditional Jewish practices have holiday restrictions. And, it's a Wednesday and it's a Jewish holiday. I can go to work. But my employer is not Jewish and I live in this world. So how do I adapt to that? So that was the first impetus for Reform Judaism, to say, okay, how do we keep what we think is the essence of Judaism, the ethical, the moral values, and see how some of our practices maybe need to be modified or adapted or changed to the times. That includes, for example, Reform Judaism has been the first in the Jewish world, for example, to grant women complete equality to men, which traditionally wasn't there, to ordain women as rabbis, to perform same-sex marriages, and all those issues that are some of the issues in which our traditions need to decide. Are we going to adapt to the times and change, or are we not?
Well, first off, this here, what was this called again? This the Ark?
This is, the Ark. Arona Kodesh in Hebrew, the Ark of the Holy. This is where we house the scrolls of Torah. And this is very much what makes a synagogue a synagogue.
Well, because it turns out I've actually read the Torah. To be accurate, I've actually read a translation of it, of course. However, I don't recall that I've ever even seen a Talmud. Can you explain the difference between the Torah and the Talmud?
So this is an important thing. So let's do it in three parts. So Torah is what we have in a scroll here, but you can have it in form book. And this is just what you might call the 5 books of Moses. So the first, if you open any Bible, the first 5 books from Genesis to Deuteronomy, that's the Torah. And in Jewish tradition, that book is almost like our constitution. That's the founding document. And that's why it's read ritually every week, and it's such an important document. But Hebrews and Jews didn't stop writing after 5 books. They always kept writing. And you have the books of the prophets, you have another 20 books that are in the Bible, right? In the Christian tradition, you will call Old Testament. And this is sometimes something that people are not really aware. People think, okay, so the Jews for 1,000 years wrote the Old Testament, and then they stop. Okay, and that of course is not true. So in the years after that, Jews definitely stopped writing Bible books because the Bible was closed and canonized and said, okay, this is the Bible. From now on, you can write amazing books, but they're not in the Bible. They're going to be on the next collection of books. Eventually, what developed, which is very unique in Jewish tradition, is the Talmud. Talmud literally means studying or learning. And so what we have is a book that starts with a discussion of some Jewish principle, some Jewish practice, some Jewish law, some Jewish story of the Bible or something like that. And then you have rabbis from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th century discussing. And the Talmud is almost like a record of their discussions, their debates. Typically one opinion and then the other opinion. And the Talmud is a fascinating text because it developed over the centuries. So in the 10th century and in the 12th century, now you have people making comments on the 2nd and 5th century discussions. So now you have a discussion on the previous discussion. And the Talmud is unique in that it's never a book whose goal is to tell you and who's right. And the right answer is, we don't have that. The main goal of the book is to show you this is how you discuss issues, and this is how you can explore them. Because the main thing that we want to do is not just hear what somebody told us is the right answer, but we want to know how we kind of go on with that conversation and have our own discussion.
Is it kind of like mathematics? Is that learning the formula is more important than knowing the answer?
That's exactly right. I used to hate it when I was a student, and I say, but I got the number right. I got 5 is the right answer. And the teacher said, my goal was not to find out 5. The goal is that you know how to do all these discussions. Talmud is very similar to that, yes.
When I was younger, I would hear Jewish people refer to themselves as the chosen people. And in my ignorance, it sounded very arrogant.
Yes.
But as I understand it now, Jews believe that God chose them to be his people as a means of testing them, so that it's a blessing as well as a burden. Do you believe that pain in life is a test sent by God?
No, of course not. I think it can be helpful sometimes to see it that way. So let me tell you about the chosen first. Every people that I know of think they are chosen somehow, in some way. America, we have a unique destiny, right? It's a unique experience, the American exceptionalism. Yeah, we're unique. Everybody's unique. I have 3 kids. Each one of them is special, and each one of them is unique in a different way. Right? In Jewish tradition, the idea of chosen was an idea that mostly the prophets of ancient Israel tried to develop, basically to say, like sometimes my mom would say to me when I was young, well, from your brothers and other people, I expect this, but from you I expect more. Right? So that's the idea of chosen is, yeah, God expects in the Bible everybody to be good people. But God has an extra set. It's almost like the honors class. It says, you Hebrews, you Jews, you have taken an extra obligation, an extra covenant. You're in the honors class. So you're chosen to rise above and do better. Now, have we risen above and done better? I hope sometimes. Sometimes definitely we didn't, and others do that. But that's the idea of chosen. It's not chosen because you're nicer or better or richer or smarter. It means we expect more from you. Right? About the pain. I think that pain is, and I don't understand why anybody could doubt it, is part of life. We have nerve system, we have pain. Right? Pain can be good. Pain makes me keep my hands out of the fire, right? So it's an alert system so I can live a better life. I would love for a world to be without pain. And I believe that if God could have created such a world, I'm sure God would have preferred a world without pain. However, turns out this is the best world God could make. Because if God could have made a better one, we'll be in it, right? This is it. This means understanding that the world that we imagine, where everything is nice and perfect and nobody ever gets sick, it's a fantasy. That's not a real world. So being realistic, there is pain in this world. We know that. So how do we understand God that is wanting all the good for us and we have pain? Some people say, well, the pain must be good for you. There must be a good reason. And those views exist within Jewish tradition as well. I like more the view of one of the particular books of the Bible, the book of Job, that is specifically to give you a different answer. What that book gives you the answer is to say, pain happens because it happens, because this is how the world works. However, you can still have a good life. You can still enjoy, you can still do wonderful things with it. And it's not God's choice to particularly give you that pain. You know, there's a huge, giant world. We as humans are a tiny, microscopic part of an amazingly huge universe, right? So it rained today and I got wet. God, why did you make the rain come on me? Really, on me? There's a whole planet, and I think that God actually took the time to make it rain on me, right? We are not at that center of the world the way we think we are. That's the message of the book of Job, and we just live in it. So what do you do when you experience pain? One is you take it. The other one is, well, you learn maybe compassion. You learn empathy. And you know, another thing, like we are now in the middle of all this virus epidemic, one thing you can do is, let's review our own actions. This is a very old Jewish teaching, which is, you see that something is going wrong in life. Well, some things are beyond my control. The virus exists. What can I do to minimize that pain? What things maybe I have done before that make this worse? For example, not having Medicare for all, having millions of people that cannot access a doctor. Yeah, that makes a pandemic way worse. And that's not the virus, that's our own doing. So that might be the useful way of thinking of, well, what's my responsibility in this pain?
There's still a lot of controversy over the Ten Commandments. However, in the Old Testament, and therefore the Torah, there are 613 mitzvot, and they're all important. There are rules like in Leviticus 19:19 that say you can't crossbreed animals, so no mules or zonkies. And Leviticus 21:18, which says disabled people can't sit where I'm currently sitting. How do rules like that get viewed in a modern world?
Yes. So in the Jewish tradition, it gets viewed in different ways. So for example, if you're on the fundamentalist side and you think that this book was actually written by God, then you think, well, it's not up to me to judge because God wrote it and all I need to do is follow it. That has typically not been the majority in the Jewish world. The majority in the Jewish world understand that God's greatest creation probably is the human mind. We can transform the world. That's why we were created according to the Torah in God's image, which means we can think, we can create, we can decide, we can legislate, we can do all those things. So it is our job, each generation, to review these laws. The way as a Reformed Jew and many other Jews do is, I'm sure that even if God wrote the book, how does God care if I eat bacon or I eat chicken? I cannot see why God should be concerned with, what I'm going to eat today, unless there's an ethical or moral or social value to that. So, for example, I understand from the Bible, and when you read the book of Genesis, that apparently God created the human to be vegetarian, right? To eat from every tree that grows, literally, right? So, when I eat meat, I'm killing animals. How are those animals treated before they got killed? Are they being suffering? Am I polluting the planet? So, for every rule, my approach typically is, what can be the ethical, moral, social reason for that rule to have existed in the first place? And then I ask, do I still have the same moral, ethical reasons to apply it? How could I apply it today? Right? So diet is a perfect example. To me, I don't know that it makes lots of difference whether a Jew follows the don't eat pig, but eat cow. However, what I take is there are moral, ethical, social implications for our diet and what we eat. And I should be mindful of those.
Turning from mitzvot, I want to talk about the word mitzvah, which I would say you're doing for me right now by appearing on my show. Can you explain to me and anybody who doesn't know what a mitzvah is?
Yes. So it's very interesting because that word is used in different ways by different people. The typical way in which you hear it is a mitzvah is a kind thing. It's a good thing. It's a good deed, right? So I help an old lady cross the street. Oh, what a mitzvah. I call my mom, even though I didn't want to call her, maybe, and just to make her happy. Oh, you did a mitzvah, right? So any kind graceful act that you do for somebody else, that's a mitzvah. But the, let's say, more original meaning of mitzvah means commandment, right? So these are all the things that God, our ethical voice, commands us to do. So, I can feed the poor, and it would be very nice if I did it. But the Jewish way of seeing it is, no, you're misunderstanding the point. It is your duty to do it. It's your obligation. You are commanded to do that. It's not just out of the goodness of your heart. You also have the obligation. Remember that expectation from you? We, God, our Jewish tradition, we have the expectation from you that you see that as your duty to do, not just being moved by your heart. So I would say that for me, the best translation of mitzvah is any act that you do because you see it as your religious or as your duty as a Jew to do.
In the Old Testament and therefore the Torah, I have to keep saying that, make sure everybody knows, because I didn't know that for most of my life. I didn't realize that. I thought the Torah would be a separate book like the Quran or something. But in the Old Testament, there isn't much talk about hell as it's normally imagined. What is the Reformed Jewish position on hell?
Yes. Well, let me tell you what is the Jewish biblical position on hell. And it's nothing. You can read every single Bible book from the very beginning of Genesis through every book of the prophets, through the book of Psalms, to the book of all of that, and there is no hell. Hell is a conception that was foreign to the first 1,000 years of biblical thinking. And it's a concept that eventually made it into Jewish tradition, the same way it made it into Christian tradition and others, came from the Greek, Persian world. And so that's why, for example, in all the Torah or in any book of any prophet and all the ones that we like, Isaiah and Jeremiah or the book of Psalms or any Bible book, the Hebrew Bible, you never see that the goal in life is for us to go to heaven, and we never see that our goal is to avoid hell. We see that the goal is to do what's right, love justice, and walk humbly with your God. That's Prophet Micah. Okay? So this is why we have the commandment to feed the poor. I don't have the commandment to make sure that the poor, after suffering poverty all their life, eventually gets to heaven. My commandment is make sure that that poor person doesn't suffer now and do all I can. Right? That's the obligation. So Jewish tradition and Reformed Jews especially are recovering very much that biblical sense that our duties and our religion is about this life. Is there anything after death? We don't know. Judaism does not obligate you to believe anything. So you want to believe that there's reincarnation and there's all kinds of things, you can do it, and some Jews do. You want to believe that there's no hell, but there is some kind of place where you go and see your ancestors. You don't have to, but Judaism doesn't object to you doing that.
Okay.
Right? You want to believe that there's nothing, that when you're done, and this was your chance in the world to do things. You're not forced to believe that, but Judaism allows you to do that as well.
So the belief isn't that there isn't an afterlife. It's that we don't know. So there could be one, but there could not be one. It's really up to the individual's
right.
belief. Okay.
Right. And I will add to that. So therefore, the belief is that our religion is not predicated on that afterlife or depending or to work towards that. We have this life to take care of. Isn't that enough? Isn't this hard enough already? Isn't there enough to keep us busy with this life, in this world, and this wonderful planet that we have? So let's focus on this, work on all of this, and after we die, if there's something there, don't worry, it will be fine.
I was speaking with another rabbi recently, and she used a phrase I really enjoyed. We were discussing this series, and she said that she didn't want to go through 20 rounds of Stump the Rabbi. And I immediately recognized she didn't coin that phrase. That was something that she had heard before or probably even encountered in her life. I'm fascinated by insider terminology like that. Can you reveal any other commonplace shibboleth amongst the Jews or even Argentine Jews?
Yes. I don't know that there are things like that, but since you mentioned that, I would, and you see what I'm doing the very Jewish thing, Talmudic thing. I'm going to disagree with that rabbi and give you the other point of view. There's nothing that I like more than Stump the Rabbi, because the one thing we encourage in the Jewish tradition is not listen to the rabbi, but you know what's the most appreciated thing in a Talmudic and traditional Judaism learning? Ask a challenging question. The challenging is important. If I ask you a softball question, nobody learns anything. The challenging question may move you, even you as a rabbi, to think of something you haven't thought before and move us all forward. So, Passover, we're going to be celebrating soon. The key element of the Passover celebration, the Seder, is not so much just the unleavened bread and the wine. The key element is that we created a ritual to encourage children to ask questions. And we have typically children asking 4 questions. And our answer is, well, since you ask, and here are some answers. Right? So this is the one phrase that I heard most Jewish people probably say ever is, you have 2 Jews in the room, you'll have 3 opinions. Right? So, and that's by design and on purpose. That's how you advance, you challenge. I never hope that people listen to what I have to say and say, yes, Rabbi, you were amazing, thank you. I'll always repeat what you said. We have discussion groups, and the discussion groups is, I put something forward, go ahead, shoot it, stump it. Let's discuss and see how we all learn something better.
What? All right, so this is from Genesis 3. And first I'm going to summarize the story before I get to the quote here. Noah got drunk and passed out in his tent. And when he did, he was laid out on the floor and his robe was open and he was exposed.
Yes.
His youngest son walked in and sees this, goes out and tells his brothers, and he and his brothers walk backwards into the room with a cloak, covering up his nakedness, and then they leave. When Noah wakes up, he knows what his youngest son has done to him, and he curses Canaan to be a servant to his brothers. Canaan is his grandson. I am so confused what I'm supposed to learn from this story, because I don't know anybody. Noah's the only one who did something wrong, who got so drunk that he passed out naked. His son didn't do anything as wrong, and his grandson certainly didn't. What am I supposed to get from the story?
So this is where you're supposed to get from the story. Trying to make something that could be a long conversation as condensed as possible. This is what you should get from the story. That every story written in the Bible was not written by God on heaven and dropped down. It was written by a human hand that looks just like this one and like yours. And people write stories often with a goal. They weren't just writing stories because they wanted to entertain people. They probably had an agenda, right? And what's the agenda? From that story, I can see a couple of things that might have been the agenda, right? For example, so the story of Noah presents the origins of humanity. It's almost like a mythical story, right? There was one father of all humanities, and from there, all the ethnic groups developed. So he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. One is the father of all the Semitic peoples. The other is of all the European peoples, Greek, Japheth. And the other one is of all the African peoples, Ham. So I see already an agenda by the writer to say, the Semitic and the Europeans, we were on the good side of this story. These Africans, they did something wrong. Now, why would somebody say that? All kinds of reasons, prejudice, rivalries, and things like that. But I think that part of also what some stories in the Bible like to do is Bible writers sometimes look at the reality, see things the way they are, and they try to explain, why did this happen? Where does it come from? And perhaps some people in the Bible saw African people, Ham descendants, Canaanites, who were their neighbors, being enslaved, and they found the story to say, oh, I know why they are slaves, because they were cursed by Noah by doing something like that. That story that you pointed out was used in America, right here, in the 1800s, as a justification of slavery of African people. Because, you see, it's not us, it's a curse. It's already in the Bible. Which shows you how the Bible can be used for terrible things, like justifying slavery. Right? The good thing is that the abolitionists, the first people who started combating the Bible, like Lloyd Garrison and other people like that, were also inspired by the Bible, but from a different part. And they read it differently. They read the part that says that God created every human in God's image, and that we need to treat every human as sons and daughters of God. So this is what I will tell you to do with that section of the Bible. Said, you might have your own agenda, authors of this story. You didn't like the Canaanites apparently very much. Not hard to understand. Israelites and Canaanites were rivals very often, or enemies. So, yeah, this is a story to discredit them. Leave that behind. Do you have anything against the Canaanites? I don't have anything against the Canaanites. Let's get the good parts of the Bible and follow those.
All right, I'd like to thank Rabbi Edery for joining me here. And gotta say, Temple Beth Shalom is a nice place. So stay tuned for 2 things. Humans have made some pretty incredible things. Castles and cathedrals, spaceships and split pea soup. But one that's not talked about enough is this: a banana. Yes, a human grew and picked and shipped and sold it to me, but this would not exist at all without humans. It's a hybrid created over hundreds of years of cultivation by humans. Just like oranges and broccoli, carrots and strawberries. Nature has provided us with a lot, but sometimes it took us to make it better. I really don't care for the term, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Putting aside that modern boots seldom have straps, the term itself was meant to mean something that is absurd. Sources say it started with German stories of Baron Munchausen, who pulled himself and his horse out of a swamp by his own hair. It eventually evolved into bootstraps, but it was still meant to mean something that cannot be done. However, now the intended irony is entirely absent. So whenever I hear someone say that the poor should pull themselves up by their bootstraps, I hear them demanding they do something that's quite literally impossible. Thanks for watching, and may the road rise with you.